There we go. So I am very excited to have Fakteh Ghanbarnejad, join us today to give a talk on impact of temporal correlations on high-risk outbreaks. This is very exciting to have you join us from basically almost the other side of the world. And I think we can live with a little bit of lag. I'm very happy that we made this technologically possible. So take it away.
Thanks a lot, Alice, for great organization, and you're doing very well. Thanks a lot, and thanks for introduction. So briefly, I can also introduce myself. I did my bachelor and master in Tehran, in Iran, in Sharif University of Technology. Then I moved to Germany. I did my PhD there in Leipzig University. Then I moved to Dresden in Max Planck Institute of Complex System for my first postdoc. I moved to Berlin and I did another postdoc, but I was independent because it was my own grant. And so since 2015, I have been independent by my own grants. And then I moved recently back to Iran at Sharif University of Technology, and now I'm assistant professor. So the fields I'm working on mainly on complex systems and networks, and I'm interested in interplay between dynamics and topology. And one of the interesting topics for me is about outbreaks, epidemic, and these types of things. And these days, unfortunately, this is a hot topic, but this is one of the things I have been working on that anyway. So today I want to speak about impact of temporal correlation on high-risk outbreaks. And we go to see what I mean by any of these terms. So this is a world map. I really like to show this one in the beginning of the presentation. You see this is historical map. One, for instance, just follow the red color on the map. You see that something was started on the heart of Africa, and during of history of humankind, it was moved around all around the world. And this and if you take a look to the numbers, what started, for instance, in the middle of Africa is one of the virus or bacteria, and by human transportation, by the time scales that we had previously, was moved later on. So the dots you can see in the map also, you see that you can just focus on one of them and you see, for instance, is, I don't know, 400s after or before Greece, and so there are different time scales. But if you take a look to the numbers, you can see we had pandemics in the history, like smallpox, like Spanish flu, and so on, and so many people were died because of that. So, for instance, for a Spanish flu, estimation says something between 50 and 100 million people were died. But this is historic. These are historical numbers, and they were cumulative numbers, let's say. But sometimes the numbers were even more than what we expected to see. One of the cases is Spanish flu, and those who were died because of that, it was not only Spanish flu, but also they had something else in their lungs. For instance, it was pneumonia or TB or whatever. So they had different types of pathogens in their body, let's say. So this is the reason it's important to understand how also pathogens interact to each other. And recently, just another infographic you can see, and these days, no need to say anything more, that we are dealing worldwide with the coronavirus. And let's see, because the virus is new, we have no clue how it would be interact, and one of the reason with other pathogens. But one thing is that nowadays the spreading of some viruses could be even faster through the whole world just because of our transportation is in another scale. So it's more important to learn how to deal with spreading phenomena and the outbreaks and so on. So one of the cases, as I said, is that we could see that TB and Spanish flu were cooperative with each other. So there were more than one pathogens in the bodies of the people who died. And this can macroscopically also change the dynamics of the spreading. HIV and hepatitis B and C, TB and malaria are another examples of such kind of cases. So these days we are dealing with that. So in some places that TB, for instance, was under control, but by presence of HIV, then the dynamics went another level. One of the worldwide map, again, you can see is about the case of HIV and the TB cases in 2012. So you can see in the South Africa, for instance, they were trying to suppress the TB, but by presence of HIV, it went to another level again. So when pathogens are interacting, the dynamics, global and macroscopic dynamics can be changed also. This is what I'm focusing on that more to show you some idea, and we start with modeling part to see how we can model such kind of things. I guess most of you have heard about SIR scenario. These days, everyone is speaking about such kind of scenarios. So we consider that we have three types of states. Let's say either one is susceptible or infected and infectious, and finally is recovered or removed. This is known as SIR model, is one of the most basic model for spreading phenomena. And in the case we have just one SIR dynamics, you can consider that we have two different parameters. So to go from S block to I block, we have infection rate, I named it alpha, and from I block to go to the R block, you have recovery rate, which I consider this is one here. I just renormalize one parameter to the other one. So just to reduce the parameter space, let's say. Then in a mean field approximation, one can write down equation like the chemical reaction, and to see that the S in neighborhood of the I with infection rate of alpha, they're gonna move to I block and so on. And if you solve these equations, this set of equations.
In the middle.
Please ask me if you have.
Yeah.
Yes,
so
sure.
I'm just going to ask a question because I think your slides are lagging a bit behind you. So what I currently see is, so the differential equations are just popping up right now. So just to kind of slow down the pace a bit, I was wondering whether you could explain a bit how does it come about that if you have two epidemics happening at the same time, that they affect one another? You mentioned before that HIV had a negative effect on, I forgot which one the other was. How is that because people change their behavior? Is it some medical issue that if I carry one virus and then I get another one that kind of does some medical network effect?
There are different cases, so each case have different scenario. But if you have TB or HIV, to get the other one, you have 10 times more chance is not a good word here, but the probability to get the second one is 10 times more. So the ones who have already TB, they have the risk of, let's say, the risk is 10 times more to get HIV or vice versa. For HIV in general, the problem that HIV suppresses the immune system, so the body is somehow welcoming to the other pathogens or can resist less regarding other pathogens. So in this scenario, we name that these are coinfective, coinfection, or the person. This is the main scenario. But in modeling part, I still I start a step by step. So in the first step, I just say the scenario of single SIR. If I just have one pathogen is spreading in the population of the host, let's say, and then I go further to see if I have two pathogens and either they are cooperative to each other or they are competing to each other. Cooperation in this sense means that if you get the first one, the host has the higher get the second one, so the pathogens are cooperative, they live in the host body together. But the competition means that if the first pathogens come to the host body, then the immune system reacts in the way that the risk to get the second one is lower, and they reduce the risk. So it means that the first pathogen somehow gets the second one to enter the host body. So you can imagine if you get some normal cold, maybe then to get the other types of cold would be a bit more difficult because you have already some sort of in your body, so you resist to get the second one. So as I said, the pathogens in the body can either be cooperative to each other, or they can be competitive to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the main idea, and we further with this to see how we can consider this in the modeling. So I hope now you can see the slides.
Yeah,
If
so
there is any
I
delay,
see
just
the
let me know.
infection rate curve has arrived by now. So yeah, please go on. Thank you.
Please stop me if something is not clear. So then I'm physicist by training, so for us it's important to see where is the phase transition. And in different complex systems, we have usually phase transition. So by changing the control parameter, one of the macroscopic observable, which we name it order parameter, is changing. And here, for instance, while I consider that the recovery rate is 1, if I plot the size of epidemic versus infection rate, which is here alpha, I have a phase transition from non-epidemic regime to epidemic regime, naively near alpha 1. And this is a continuous, I don't know how I can hide this. If you I hide this one, you may. Do you still see my?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Hide?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to hide to see it fully. So we have a continuous phase transition from non-epidemic regime to epidemic regime. And why does it matter? In a real world, the point is that if I change just a bit the control parameter, the size of epidemic also changes little by little. So this is continuously changing. So if I have some sort of warning signal, I know how to bring under control the dynamics. And this is why it's important. But now I want to consider 2 pathogens. So I consider, instead of just 1, I have 2. One of them is A. So I'm expanding this diagram, let's say. So I have now susceptible ones, but I have pathogen A, and I can be infectious regarding to the A with capital A, and I can be recovered from that one. Then is the little a. Then on the other hand, I have the pathogen B. I can be infectious regarding the pathogen B, and I can be recovered regarding to that. And this is little b. But while I have one of these one, either I'm infectious or I'm already recovered from A, I still can get the second one, which is the B, capital B. So as you can see now, I have 9 states. And I can have all of these arrows shows different rates, which could be infection rates or recovery rates and so on. But just for simplification, because it would be too much parameters that can be easily lost in the parameter space, I consider the symmetric case without losing generality, and later on I can relax it. And I can see that the main results are robust. So for the first step, I consider that does not matter either I get A or B. I just say that if I get the first pathogen, either A or B, I'm gonna get it with probability or rate P. And as soon as I have the first one, or I'm recovered from the first one, with probability Q, I'm gonna get the second one. So now I have just 2 parameters. So here is with probability, or it could be with the rates, so alpha and beta, let's say. So in the next slide, what you can see is alpha, which is the rates. So in the x-axis, we have alpha, which is the infection rate regarding to the first diseases. So the rate that I can get infected by the first diseases. And the C shows the level of cooperation, which is beta over alpha. If it's exactly 1, it means that 2 diseases are independently spreading in the population. So it means that beta and alpha exactly are the same. So I can reproduce the result I have seen before just for one single SIR. And in the y-axis, I'm looking to the amount of people who were infected, either just A or just B or both of them. So whoever was infected, no matter just a single one or both of these one. So if I increase the level of cooperation, it means that the secondary infection rate is getting higher than the first infection rate. And if it's less than 1, it means that I'm in a competitive regime. So it means that if I get the first one, I have some sort of immunity against the second one. So what you can see here is that the solid curve shows the previous result because the cooperation rate is exactly 1. So alpha and beta rates are exactly the same. So I can have the results of the single SIR dynamics. But if I'm going to the cooperative regime and I increase cooperation rate over 1, what you can see is that, first of all, the outbreak happens where I didn't expect any outbreak happens. So alpha is now less than 1, but as you can see for the red, blue, and other colors, you can see that it happens less than previous alpha. So I didn't expect any outbreak happens just because now there are 2 pathogens and they are cooperative to each other. Then the threshold is reduced and the outbreaks happen somewhere that I didn't expect any outbreak. And the second point you can see is now the phase transition is changed, the order of phase transition is changed. And previously I had a continuous transition. Now I suddenly jump up. So I have a gap. So it means that I change just at the threshold. I change just a bit the infection rate, but suddenly the amount of people gonna be affected would be something, for instance, 60% of the society. So this is a bad news. This is something happened for Spanish flu, just as an example. So this is the point. So if they are cooperative, the overall dynamics can be changed. But this was the mean field result. What could be happen if I have networks topology and how topology can affect this one? So for network topology, we tried first the Erdős-Rényi networks because we expect that for large, sparse enough Erdős-Rényi networks, I can consider them as locally 3. And on the other hand, also I expect that because of this random structure of the Erdős-Rényi networks, I can see the more or less similar result on the mean field approximation also. So what I could see, what you see in the small plot inside this one, you see that I take a look to the amount of people who got infected. They get A and B, both of them. And as you can see, you have similar result with the mean field, and you can see at the transition point, there was a discontinuous transition. But the interesting thing was here that if I was looking to the probability to end to those outbreaks, which is different, the small plot is showing how big were the outbreaks. But the big plot shows that the probability to end to those big outbreaks is continuously changing. So in physics, we say that we have 2 order parameters. One of them is the density of the giant cluster, let's say. The other one is the probability to end to that giant cluster. And one of them is discontinuously changed. The other one is continuously changed. So I hope everyone is following me. If you have any question, please stop me and ask me the question.
So
is it clear?
The giant cluster, that's how many people have both diseases, either of the diseases, A and B?
Exactly. You can plot all, but the majority of these one are AB cluster. So it doesn't matter if you plot the AB cluster or you plot AB plus A plus B cluster. The majority of those are usually AB clusters.
And so how do you distinguish those cases? So you either end up having a large cluster or with high density, or you don't.
You can't count
how many people
at the end of the dynamics.
At the end, so do you at the end have either 0 or something more than 0, or where do you set the threshold of saying this is a disease state and this is a healthy state for the system?
At the end of dynamics, because this is SIR dynamics, so if you have no more infectious people, that the dynamics dies out. So you know when the dynamics dies out. When the dynamics dies out, then you count how many of the people on the networks were affected. You just calculate them, and that's easy. So, as you can see, and from physics point of view, this is very important because Grasberger on 1984 showed that SIR dynamics is in the same universality class of ordinary percolation. Ordinary percolation in general for critical phenomena is so important because this is what we do. We just classify the critical phenomena, and the main classification is based on the different types of percolations. So SIR was shown that was in ordinary percolation universality class. But here now I coupled two SIR dynamics, and then I could see that now I have hybrid transition. I didn't expect to see that. So for SIR, I expected to have continuous phase transition, but now regarding to one of the order parameters, I have continuous transition, and regarding to the other one, I have discontinuous transition. So physics point of view also, this was very important. And as I said, application point of view also is important because if you have a discontinuous transition, it means that just by changing a little bit of the probability of getting infected, then suddenly you can jump up to half of the population or something like that. So then it means that the separation of such kind of dynamics is more difficult than a normal single spreading dynamic, let's say. And now is the main things in this talk, I wanted to speak about temporal empirical networks. So this is a paper under review, and you can find more details of that on arXiv, but I try to give you the main idea of this paper. So I showed you that topology matters, and topology can affect also this one. We have different papers. We can see that those papers later on, but this in this talk, I just focus in this temporal empirical networks. So for the data, we use 3 empirical networks data from sociopatterns.org. So the first data is hospital data, the second one is conference data, and the third one is primary schools, one primary school. So what they did is that they had some electrical patches on people for instance, 4 days, 3 days, or 32 hours. And whoever was in front of the other one in a given distance, for instance, 1 meter, then there was one click, and it was written that, okay, person A has seen person Z and at this time. So these events are written. Now I have a temporal network, let's say. So I know how people have interacted during these days or hours in hospital, conference, or these primaries. So this is the data we worked with. And if you remember in the title of this talk, I spoke about the risks. So if you have seen this plot before, but what I mean by risk, you can speak about risks also. So I told you I'm taking a look to 2 different macroscopic observables or order parameter, or I can name them also risks. So the risks, as I said, so one of the risks is how big is an outbreak, which is the y-axis here. In the x-axis, I'm changing the probability of getting infected for the first virus or bacteria, the first pathogen. And I fix Q, which is probability to get the second one while I have the first one in the cooperative regime, which I fix it here either as Q equal 1, then it means that I'm in a strongest cooperation between 2 pathogens, or Q is equal to P, which means that I have 2 independent dynamics. So one risk for me is to take a look, as I said, in the y-axis, to take a look how big is the outbreak size. How many of the how many percentage of the society gonna get infected, which is now the big question here for COVID-19, for instance. How many of the people gonna get infected? And the color code here shows the probability to end to that big outbreak size, let's say. So for instance, if I'm taking a look to those cases of realizations for the simulations, how many of my realizations ended to the cases the outbreak was more than 0.7. So then I can say I have two types of risk, let's say. How much is the risk to have an outbreak with size of more than 70% of the society, and how big would be that one? So you see, there are two different risks. I can read these ones and tools. Here, I just tuned the recovery rate regarding to the periodic behavior of the temporal topology I had. Why? Because so I had three different temporal networks. So the first one was for the hospital, conference, and school. And you can see that I had this daily or hours periodic behavior, and I use also periodic boundary condition also. But the recovery rate for me now is the way that during this pause, actually the dynamic can survive. Just to be fair to compare these three temporal networks. But for Q, I fixed it to 1. So the probability to get infected by the second pathogen, if I have already the first pathogen in the host body, and I'm spanning the P parameter to see what's going on.
So
and what I see,
just to clarify what we're seeing here, so we just had, oh, now the shuffling slide is appearing, but on the last slide you had bar charts, and there was a letter C on the y-axis. So C is that the same as the collaboration between pathogens, or is that a different quantity now that we're seeing?
Here you mean? Do you see now this one?
So now I see the slide with where it says data. So these are the 3 data sets that you have, and now it's disappearing. Risks. So I meant later than that. Later than that, you had a slide with bar charts. So you had orange bars, and there was a C on the y-axis. Exactly. So periodic behavior.
Yeah, exactly. No, here I just wanted to say that the data, these temporal networks have this periodic behavior. So in the y-axis,
so the connectivity. That's the number of edges or something?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So the C is connected of that temporal network, and then the x-axis is the time axis for me. I showed that I have periodic behavior, and I just said that I tuned the recovery rate of the dynamics in the way that during this pause, that is the time characteristics of each of these temporal networks, the reading dynamics could survive. Is it clear? Because you can imagine if the recovery, if for instance, take a look to just to the first plot A, to the panel A. There is a pause between 1 and 2nd day. So I don't have connectivity. So if the recovery rate is less than this, so then it means that the dynamics going. So I just to be and give the dynamics the chance to survive, not just because of the pause that the temporal networks is imposing. So I tune the recovery rate based on this to give the chance to dynamics to survive during given these pauses, let's say. So is it clear? I just wanted to clarify how I tune the parameters.
Thank you.
Then I need to know the shufflings. Why because I wanted to study how the correlation, temporal correlation of these temporal networks affect the dynamics I had. So I need to shuffle this temporal correlation. But how I can shuffle these temporal correlations? There are different ways. So I need just to explain a couple of terms here. I hope now the lag is not that much. You can follow really the slide. So the shuffling side, I use the D as a daily pattern. So the frequency of events, namely contact occurrence. Then I have the C term, which presents the community structure. B is showing the burst event dynamics of single links, and W is showing weight topology correlation. So I just explained this abbreviation, let's say, for the letter, and I'm later on using this. For the shuffling, so I have different types of shuffling. I considered 5 types of shuffling. The first one, I hope now you can see the slides here, is DCWB. It means that I kept the daily pattern and I don't know, this weight one, burstiness, and so on, but the rest are shuffled. For the second one, the link sequence are shuffled. So the daily and burstiness, for instance, are conserved. And for DCW, time are shuffled. For the D, which is the daily patterns are kept, and then it's a configuration model, so the rest, everything is shuffled. And we also introduced another types of shuffling with we keep same order of the events, but we change the random distribution of the time between the events. So we randomize the distribution of the time intervals between events, but I'm not changing the order of any of these events. So as you can see, I defined 5 different types of shuffling to address how any of these one affect the dynamics. And either the single spreading dynamic or cooperative dynamics. This is my aim to reach. Just to show you in a schematic way also what I meant by this shuffling, if you can see these slides, for instance, in the A panel, you see the original temporal network, just part of that, just to show to present what, to illustrate what I wanna do in whole network, is that, for instance, I have 4 nodes. They are A, B, C, D. As you can see in the panel A, between node A and D at time t 20 and 50, 1 interaction happened. Between node A and B at time 30, 1 interaction happened. And in the down part also you can see it's another representative of that. You can see that in the x-axis the time is going, and in the y-axis you have the nodes, and whenever 1 interaction happens, there is 1 connection between these 2 nodes. And you can see then in the other panels like B, C, D, E, and F, different types of shuffling. As you can see, for instance, in the original data between node A and B, just 1 interaction happened at time 30, but this interaction, this event was disappeared at panel B. This interaction was repeated at 0 time, 50, and 35, panel C, different shuffling, and so on. So this is the idea of how I have shuffled. This just to keep in your mind that I have shuffled differently to see each time the effect of one of these correlation on the dynamic. What I can do, so I can take a look to the data, that I can simulate the dynamics on different temporal empirical networks. One of them was hospital. In the left side, you can see they were coinfective SIR scenario, so when Q was 1, and in the right side, whenever the Q was exactly the same as P, and they were 2 independent pathogen spreading, so they were not interacting to each other. And you can see 2 types of risks. One of them is how big the outbreak size would be. The other risks present how is the probability to have those big outbreaks, let's say. So you can see I have these plots, but it would be hard to follow and hard to compare what is happening now. So I need quantitative measurement to see how correlation would affect this one. My eyes, you can follow there. Clearly something happens. But how I can quantitatively measure these differences? So again, you can do the simulation for a conference network, and you can do the simulation for a school network, and you see the difference by eyes by following this color plots. But for measuring this one quantitatively, I need to define what is high risk. If you remember in the title, I told you I want to speak about high risk outbreaks. So for this plot that I had, I hope that the lag is on and you can follow me.
We're now looking
so
at the
in the left
conference data set. That's what we currently
so
have.
I
And it's changing to something. School. We're now looking at the school data set.
so just a bit, it takes time that the
Okay, so
next
now
one
it says
comes.
high risk outbreaks. And there's stuff popping up. Equations. Yeah.
Exactly. I want to see what is this high risk outbreaks. So as I showed you, I have these types of plots in the top left side, and I want to measure the high risk outbreaks. What I mean by high risk one, as you can see, if you focus on the part of the plot that we have this yellow part, these are those outbreaks that the size of outbreaks is high, and the probability to end those outbreaks also is high. So the color code is yellow, it means they are higher probable. And also the size of outbreak is more than 50%, or is big enough, let's say. So I want to focus on those. So I focus on P star for the given probability of the infection probability that leads to such high risk outbreaks. Then I average over this one, the average size of the outbreak and the average probability to end that part. So this is what I'm saying. So I'm not sampling all the realization, rather I just focus on those high risk outbreaks and I average on these high risk outbreaks one. And now I go further and I see how I can compare all of these one. If I focus, I hope that you can see this slide of the
there's
three
something
panels.
3 panels are just arriving.
Exactly. So in the 3 panels, in the left side, as I explained for you, I focus on the P star, which is this green bar in the left panel. And specifically on that P star, I focus on the regime of parameter that I have just this yellow regime. So this yellow part, which shows the high probable events that ending to those big outbreak sizes. If I come to the middle panel, this is exactly the distribution of the distribution for distribution of just that amount of the events, and I see that I have 2 peaks, and I focus on just one of these peaks between 0.6 and 0.8. So if I take a look to the size of outbreaks, so I focus on that this specific peak, and in the right panel, as you can see, I use this K-cluster measurement to find these ones, because here in the middle panel you can see that it's easy to find out that there are 2 peaks, and I can focus on just one of those peaks. But I have shown you these plots in 3 different slides from hospital, conference, and school, and sometimes the upper cluster is not that much clear and it's not that much easy to distinguish. So we needed to go to this method of K-cluster method and to distinguish between these ones. So we use this K-cluster method and we find out which events are exactly those high-risk outbreak events, and then we average over these ones. So I hope this would be clear. And now I show the results for 3 different data sets that I have. So just briefly, I hope that you can see this plot. There are the first row I have hospital results, the second row I have conference results, and the third row I have a school result. In the 2 first columns, I have the case that Q was equal to 1, which means the strongest cooperation between 2 pathogens. And in the 2 right columns, I have Q equal to P, which means that 2 pathogens were independently spreading in the population. And what you can see, it's hard to follow all of this one, but each of the colors are showing the blue one is showing the original data. And then I'm looking to different colors, which shows the different shuffling. So again, it would be difficult to follow, but I just summarize the main results here for you, that what we can learn from these plots. So I hope now you are coming to this slide also. So just to summarize is that in order to understand the impact of temporal correlations on a spreading phenomena, not only the proper order parameter and proper averaging matters, but also the dependency on the range of the control parameter also matters. What it means that I need to take a look to both the outbreak size and also the probability to end to those big outbreaks, let's say. And I need to figure out it's better not to average to all of the samples, rather to focus on those high risk cases and to average over those ones. Then I can make a fair comparison, and I can see that in some cases, when exactly is the control parameter matters also. They are not behaving exactly the same. Cooperation, the second point is that cooperation between two diseases facilitates the spreading dynamics, not only on original networks, but also on shuffled networks. So cooperation in all these scenarios is facilitating the spreading and somehow increase the risk, let's say. The ordering of the events and especially temporal features have a greater effect on coinfection. So it means that these types of correlations I had, these temporal networks, they were more affecting the coinfective scenarios rather than single SIR scenario. While randomization of the sequence of the events decrease AB in the coinfection process has no consistent effect on the independent infection dynamics and can either decrease or increase the outbreak size. So for the single scenario, single spreading dynamics, it matters what is exactly your control parameter, and it may change, increase or decrease the outbreak size. In both independent infection and coinfection, daily patterns have no strong effect on the outbreak size, but they can change the probability of outbreaks for various networks. So maybe one order parameter is not showing a strong effect by these temporal correlations, but the other order parameter can change a strong correlation. So it's important to take a look to both of these risks, let's say. This was the main message here. We also check this another way because the time is flying. I just try to very fast also say the other way. So in the previous slides, I show you that how to choose the high risk cases and then average over this one and then make the comparison and to see the effect of temporal correlations on that. There was another way also to make the comparison. You could compare, for instance, two plots, pixel by pixel, and after that to average that. So for that, you can see, as you can see in this plot, what would be the comparison if I summarize and say fastly, just to not to use any more time. The result says that the difference between the result of AB distribution for coinfection on each shuffled network and its original counterpart is shown in this plot, as you can see. The sequence of events has the most significant effect on the results. If you can take a look, for instance, on the SOU shuffling, you see that they are the closest one to the original one. So it means that the sequence of events has the most effect on the results, while the other shuffling were shuffling the other temporal correlations. The two measures agree that this shuffle has the greatest impact on the conference and the primary school networks, while the DCB has the greatest impact on the hospital network. So it means that although more or less these networks were in the same size or same time period, I have looked at that, but I can say each of them have different characteristics also. So the conference and primary school had some similarities, while the hospital network had different structure. You can imagine in the hospital you have nurses, sick people and so on, and you can imagine that the the interactions are different happening comparing the conference and primary school. So you could see also these temporal correlations were different and they were affecting differently the dynamics, let's say. These types of things are important to know how you can actually organize better hospitals or schools or conferences to reduce the risk of outbreaks. And these days also, you know, that if I'm gonna open the schools again, most of the cases are also now in the world now, we have closure of the schools, but you can imagine that if I want to open and come back to the normal situation, I can change also the organization of the school, conference, events, hospitals and so on in order to decrease the risk of outbreaks, especially in the case of I have more than one pathogens in the population. So I just wanted to say you that for SIR dynamics, I tried to go further. So here you can see some of my papers that I expanded the SIR dynamics to 2 pathogens, to 3 or even n pathogens that they are interacting to each other. And you can find more results in different papers of mine. And I wanted to thank the results that you have seen for these temporal networks are done basically by my students, Sina, Sajjadi, and my colleague also, Reza Ejtehadi. I want to thank them also. And partially was this project financed also with DFK. And then I want to say you also that the similar approach could be applied for SIS model also. And I can expand also SIS model further and consider that I have more than one pathogens. For this also, you can go and take a look to my papers for 2 pathogens when they are interacting in SIS dynamics, for 3 of them, and now we are working on 4, and I hope that I can generalize it to n similar to SIR also. But still I'm puzzled how to go to generalization of more than 3 or 4 pathogens in SIS manner, let's say. And here, as I said, you can find my papers. I just wanted to say that what I told you in general is named disease ecology. And just to come back again to that scenario is that, as I said, your body is full of microbes, either virus or bacteria. If you take a look to this, you can see that the cells that you are carrying on of your body is something like that. You just one of your leg is your own cells. The rest of the cells you are carrying are the microbial cells that are living in your body. If genetically take a look to this also, you are just carrying genes of yourselves is something like about half of your feet, and then the rest of your body is genetic information of the other virus bacteria that we are carrying, let's say. So a single body is carrying so much virus bacteria. And when a new one as a pathogen comes to the body, it's entering like to an ecological system and they interact with each other. So either they compete or cooperate or so on. So it's important to understand this scenario as ecological view, let's say. This sounds new in modern Western medicine, but this is not new. I'm Iranian and I'm Persian, so I'm familiar with Avicenna. 1,000 years ago, actually, Avicenna had a book on medicine. This book was famous also in the Western academy. And in his book, actually, he has used the ecological term for some of these diseases. And he used really warm, humid, and these kinds of ecological things, and said that each body is either warm or cold or humid or non-humid and so on. And then he classified bodies as ecological system, and he tried to treat as ecological system to some of these diseases. So I just want to advertise also one event, workshop I'm organizing with my colleagues in 2021 on disease ecology. And also the book was published in last year, Dynamics on and off Complex Networks. It's machine learning and a statistical physics approach. So you may take a look to this book also and find something interesting. Thanks for your attention. So I'm looking forward to answer any question you have.
Thank you, Fakteh. I'm going to thank you on behalf of everyone who has been listening. And so if you have any questions, just unmute yourself or ask in the chat. So Nicholas, do you want to ask your question yourself, or should I read it to the chat?
I can. So I was curious if you could explain again, near the beginning of your talk, you were talking about discontinuous transitions, and I was wondering if you could explain again. I know you explained it, but I was wondering if you could explain it again, why that's the case. And then you said that you didn't expect it, and I was curious if you could comment on that as well.
Yeah, the point is that I don't know what is your background. If you say me, it would help a lot. I can explain easier. Are you a physicist or mathematician or computer scientist?
I'm in applied math.
Okay, so I consider that you are familiar with some of these concepts about the transition and also bifurcation and so on. So the point is that when you want to have this continuous transition, you need some sort of nucleation, as we say in the physics. What it means in this case is that, for instance, in our paper, we tried different topology to figure out what kind of topology give you the chance to make first order or second order phase transition. It means continuous or discontinuous phase transition. For continuous phase transition, if imagine that there are two pathogens that are growing to each other and they are highly cooperative. So it means that as soon as you have the first one, you get the second one. If you can see the second one always in your neighborhood, they always grow to each other. So as soon as you get the first one, you see the second one and you get the second one. So you're gonna get this one. So they're gonna grow together, but with a higher, let's say, effective infection rate. In this scenario, you cannot make any discontinuous transition because although they are highly cooperative, but because they can see each other often next to each other, as soon as you get the first one, the host get the first one, gonna get the second one, and they grow to each other. They now looks like a single pathogen with higher effective transmissibility, let's say. Then the transition is continuous. There is no discontinuous transition. But what you need to make a discontinuous transition is some sort of nucleation. And this is when topology can play a role. Either the topology give you the chance to make nucleation or not. How? I just make an example. Imagine I have a full tree. I don't have any loop. And I start from a single node which has both of the diseases. It has A and B, but as you know, it's a stochastic process. In the next time step, you can imagine A goes to one of the branch and B goes to the other branch. What's gonna happen? You don't see again any discontinuity in the transition. Why? Because A just goes to this branch, B goes to this branch. So they split alone. They cannot see each other. There is no loop. This is tree. It's go further and there is no interaction between two pathogens. Then nothing gonna happen to make the discontinuous transition, discontinuous transition. If they survive, they survive. If they die out alone. But they don't interact with each other. But what is the difference between a tree and Erdos-Renyi network is that in Erdos-Renyi, which you consider that they are locally tree, but you still have long loops. It means that after they are separated, A goes to one branch, B goes to the other branch, but after a while, they can see each other. As soon as they see each other, because the probability to get the second infection is quite high, so the whole branch behind gonna get the second pathogen, and vice versa. So suddenly the whole network's gonna fire up. That's the reason you're gonna see this continuous transition, because the surviving probability of any of these A or B is not that much high, and they can be separated through the topology. But later on, the nucleation happened, and although it was not high probability to survive separately, but they could survive and they could see each other through lungs. And then suddenly 50%, 60%, or even more of the networks got infected by both of these. So I hope that I could explain what is happening, how topology matters, and what is the nucleation idea that you need to make by topology to make such kind of discontinuous transition. Please ask me if something is not clear.
That helps a lot. Thank you.
Great.
That was really insightful. Thank you, Fakteh. Are there any more questions? So we're a bit over time already. Fakteh, because there was a lag in the slides, perhaps you could share the slides with me and I can put them online. And if there's a, perhaps people can email you if they have further questions on the topic.
I can send you, yeah.
That would be great. Okay, thank you so much. This has been really insightful. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll send the invite out for the next seminar hopefully soon, and hope to see you all back again next week.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Fakteh.
Thank you, Fakteh. Thank you, Alice. Have a nice day. Ciao.
Ciao.